Introduction to Machiavelli's Philosophy. Niccolò Machiavelli, 1469–1527, was an Italian diplomat, philosopher, and political theorist, best known for his work The Prince, written in 1513 but published posthumously in 1532. The Prince is often considered one of the most influential political works of the Renaissance and has continued to shape political thought to this day. It is a practical guidebook on power and statecraft, offering advice on how rulers should behave to maintain and consolidate power in a highly unpredictable world. Machiavelli's philosophy is grounded in realpolitik, a pragmatic approach to politics that emphasizes the need for rulers to focus on achieving their goals, often by any means necessary without being bound by traditional ethical or moral standards. His ideas are grounded in a cynical view of human nature, where he sees people as primarily self-interested, fickle, and driven by emotions such as fear and desire. As such, a ruler must navigate these forces effectively to maintain their rule. Machiavelli's view of political leadership. Machiavelli wrote, "The Prince, during a time of intense political instability in Italy, where numerous city-states and principalities were constantly at war with each other or under the threat of foreign invasions. In this turbulent environment, Machiavelli recognized that rulers, especially new ones, needed to be shrewd and adaptable to survive. His advice was not necessarily about moral behavior, but about practical success in leadership. In The Prince, Machiavelli outlined several key themes regarding how rulers should approach power, some of which are radically different from traditional ideals of leadership. The ends justify the means. One of Machiavelli's most controversial ideas is that rulers should do whatever is necessary to maintain power, even if it involves deceit, manipulation, or cruelty. He is often associated with the phrase, "the ends justify the means," meaning that the moral quality of an action is less important than the ultimate goal of maintaining the state and securing the ruler's position. The importance of pragmatism. Machiavelli advises that rulers should not be bound by conventional ideas of virtue. Instead, they should adapt to the situation at hand. If being cruel or deceitful will help a ruler achieve their goals, then they should do so, but only as long as it is necessary and doesn't backfire. Virtù and Fortuna. Machiavelli introduces the concepts of virtù and fortuna to explain the balance between human agency and luck. Virtù refers to a ruler's ability to shape their destiny through strength, wisdom, and decisiveness, while fortuna represents chance or luck. According to Machiavelli, the best rulers know how to manipulate fortune through their virtù. The role of fear versus love. One of the most famous and debated parts of The Prince is Machiavelli's analysis of fear and love as tools for leadership. Machiavelli explores whether it is better for a ruler to be loved or feared by their subjects. His conclusion: fear is more reliable than love. Fear versus love, the core of Machiavelli's power. Strategy. Machiavelli believed that both love and fear were important for a ruler, but he argued that fear was the more stable and reliable of the two. Let's break down his reasoning. Love is unstable. People's affections can change quickly. If a ruler relies on being loved by their subjects, this love can easily dissipate, especially when the ruler is no longer able to fulfill promises or manage challenges effectively. Love is subject to the whims of the people and can fade or even turn into resentment. People might also love a ruler for personal benefits, not out of genuine loyalty, so when those benefits change, so does their affection. Fear is more controllable. Fear, on the other hand, is consistent and controllable. Fear of punishment or retribution ensures that people will adhere to the ruler's commands, not necessarily out of affection, but because they are afraid of the consequences of disobedience. Fear is driven by the instinct for self-preservation, which is often more reliable than the pursuit of affection. Machiavelli famously states in The Prince, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two has to be wanting." This quote encapsulates his advice. While being loved can help a ruler, Fear provides a solid foundation for control that can withstand the test of time, especially during crises or periods of political instability. Why fear is more reliable than love. Machiavelli's reasoning is rooted in human psychology. People are often driven by self-interest and fear of loss more strongly than by affection. This is why fear as a tool for a ruler is often seen as more pragmatic than love. Let's explore some of Machiavelli's key points on the subject. Fear creates obedience. Fear of punishment is a strong motivator for compliance. When people fear the consequences of defying authority, they are more likely to follow orders. This form of obedience can be highly effective in maintaining control, as it creates an environment where disobedience is risky and costly. Fear is unchanging. Unlike love, which can be influenced by emotions, fear remains relatively constant. People can be easily swayed by love, but it's much harder for them to ignore fear, especially if it involves punishment, loss of status, or even life-threatening consequences. Self-preservation trumps loyalty. While people might love a ruler because of their fairness or generosity, they are more likely to follow a ruler out of fear of losing their safety, livelihood, or position. In times of conflict or uncertainty, people may be less inclined to love and more focused on their own survival. Machiavelli's caution against excessive cruelty. However, Machiavelli is not advocating for blind cruelty or excessive use of fear. He is careful to note that cruelty must be used wisely. Excessive cruelty can lead to hatred, which is far more dangerous than fear. A ruler who is hated by their subjects may find themselves vulnerable to rebellion and insurrection. Machiavelli advises that rulers should inspire fear in such a way that it avoids creating hatred. Fear should be about the ruler's ability to enforce laws and punish transgressions, not about personal cruelty or vindictiveness. In fact, he suggests that a ruler should aim to avoid being despised, as hatred can lead to political instability and ultimately overthrow the ruler. The practical application of fear in leadership. In practical terms, Machiavelli's advice can be seen in how leaders use fear to consolidate power. Throughout history, many authoritarian rulers and dictators have employed fear to control their populations, whether through military force, surveillance, or propaganda. Fear can also manifest in more subtle ways, such as through economic sanctions, the creation of external enemies, or even the use of legal systems to punish dissent. However, Machiavelli's analysis goes beyond just political leadership. His work can be applied to a wide range of contexts, including business and organizational leadership. A leader in any field who is able to establish a reputation for decisiveness, strength, and the ability to punish or reward based on behavior is likely to gain the respect and compliance of those they lead. Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince remains a critical text for understanding the dynamics of political power. Through his discussions of fear versus love, Machiavelli teaches that fear is a more reliable and stable foundation for leadership than love. Fear can compel obedience, protect the ruler's authority, and endure even in times of crisis. However, a balance must be struck. Too much cruelty can lead to hatred and rebellion. The best rulers understand how to use fear strategically, while avoiding the pitfalls of excessive cruelty. The difference between fear and love in The Prince. Niccolò Machiavelli delves into the complexities of leadership and human behavior. One of his most famous and widely debated ideas is the concept that a ruler should aim to be both loved and feared. But if forced to choose between the two, fear is the superior emotion for maintaining control and power. Let's explore this distinction in detail. Love and its unpredictability. Love is often seen as the more noble and virtuous emotion. A ruler who is loved by their subjects enjoys the benefits of loyalty, goodwill, and positive regard from the people. However, Machiavelli cautions that love is inherently unstable and dependent on a variety of unpredictable factors. Here's why. Emotional fickleness. People's feelings of affection can change based on personal circumstances or external conditions. For example, a ruler might be loved when times are good, but this love can quickly dissipate in times of hardship, economic crisis, or political instability. People may feel betrayed or disappointed if the ruler is unable to meet their expectations, and this shift in emotional attachment can lead to dissatisfaction or even rebellion. Example: if a ruler who was once loved is unable to manage a war or handle an economic downturn, the people's affection might turn into frustration, making it harder for the ruler to maintain their authority. Self-interest. Love in the context of governance is often driven by self-interest. People may love a ruler as long as the ruler's actions align with their own interests or desires. However, this affection can fade as soon as those interests are no longer being met. If a ruler stops providing benefits or protection, the loyalty stemming from love will weaken. Example: a ruler who is generous or promises benefits, e.g., better living conditions, welfare, might enjoy love and admiration. But if those promises are broken or not fulfilled, the people will quickly stop loving the ruler, as their affection is more transactional than genuine. Vulnerability of love. Love is a soft emotion. It relies on positive experiences and shared benefits. When these positive experiences are interrupted, love can quickly transform into disdain, or worse, hostility. As a result, a ruler who places too much reliance on love risks losing that affection and consequently their control, fear, and its reliability. In contrast to love, fear is much more reliable and controllable. The emotional response of fear is driven by a desire to avoid pain or negative consequences. This makes fear a stronger motivator than love for a ruler seeking stability and long-term power. Here's why fear is seen as the superior emotion for a ruler to cultivate. Fear of punishment. Fear often arises from the threat of punishment, loss, or danger. The instinct for self-preservation is deeply ingrained in human nature, meaning that people are often more motivated by the desire to avoid pain or harm than by the pursuit of pleasure or affection. Fear creates a more immediate, visceral response to the ruler's authority. Example: a ruler who instills fear can ensure that their subjects comply with their commands simply because people fear the consequences of disobedience. If a ruler punishes wrongdoers swiftly and severely, others will be deterred from challenging the ruler's power due to the fear of similar punishment. Consistency of fear. Fear is more consistent because it does not rely on positive emotions or goodwill. The fear of consequences remains constant, regardless of the ruler's popularity or the state of affairs. A ruler can maintain control by ensuring that fear of punishment is always present, making it harder for the subjects to act against them. Example: even if the people dislike a ruler, as long as they fear the ruler's ability to punish or retaliate, they are likely to comply with laws and regulations. Fear of imprisonment, loss of status, or even death can keep people in line. Fear of the unknown. Fear can also stem from the unknown or uncertainty. When people are unsure about the ruler's future actions or the consequences of defying authority, they tend to stay compliant to avoid negative outcomes. This uncertainty can be used strategically by the ruler to maintain control. Example: a ruler who keeps their subjects in the dark about the full extent of their power or the punishments they might enact could create an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty, where people remain in line to avoid provoking the ruler. Psychological impact of fear. Fear is a deeply ingrained emotional response that has evolved over centuries. From a psychological perspective, fear has the ability to override rational thought and influence behavior in a way that love cannot. People's basic survival instincts often override their desires for affection, making fear an even more powerful tool for a ruler. Example: think of a business leader who instills fear of job loss or negative consequences for poor performance. The fear of being fired or demoted might compel employees to work harder, adhere to company policies, and avoid actions that might harm the company's reputation. Why fear is more controllable than love. Machiavelli argues that fear is easier for a ruler to control than love for several reasons. Predictability. Love can be swayed by circumstances, but fear is rooted in a more universal and predictable emotion. Fear of punishment or loss is less likely to change based on the ruler's popularity or the public's feelings about the ruler. As long as the threat of punishment exists, the subjects are likely to obey. Example: if a ruler institutes harsh penalties for crime, those who fear the penalties will avoid criminal activity regardless of whether they like the ruler personally. Diminishing returns of love. A ruler might work hard to maintain their subjects' love, but there are limits to how much affection they can inspire. People can grow tired of being constantly courted, or may feel entitled to more benefits, which could weaken the love. In contrast, fear, once instilled, remains effective until the threat is removed. Control over fear. A ruler can craft an environment that constantly reinforces the fear of consequences, thereby keeping subjects in check. By using fear as a tool to enforce laws, ensure loyalty, and maintain stability, the ruler has more leverage and can keep people in line. Love, on the other hand, is harder to create and maintain consistently over time. Machiavelli's conclusion. Fear as the superior emotion. Machiavelli concludes that while it would be ideal for a ruler to be both loved and feared, fear is the superior emotion for maintaining power. This is because fear creates compliance and keeps people in line through the threat of punishment. Fear is more constant and reliable than love, which can be fickle and change with circumstances. Fear can be controlled and used strategically by the ruler to maintain power, whereas love is more difficult to manage and maintain. However, Machiavelli also advises that rulers should avoid cruelty that leads to hatred, as excessive cruelty could turn fear into resentment, which could ultimately weaken the ruler's position. The fear that a ruler instills should be tied to respect for their authority and should not make people despise them. While love may create positive relationships and a sense of goodwill, fear is a more stable, predictable, and controllable force that ensures obedience and stability in the long run. Machiavelli's insight into the nature of power shows that effective rulers must be able to strike a balance between the two emotions. But when forced to choose, fear provides the more reliable foundation for control and governance. Why fear works. Human nature and psychology. Machiavelli's view on the power of fear is deeply rooted in an understanding of human psychology and our evolutionary instincts. To fully grasp why fear is such an effective tool for rulers, we need to explore how human behavior is shaped by our natural survival instincts and how fear, as an emotional response, plays a crucial role in shaping our decisions, actions, and obedience to authority. Fear, a natural and instinctual response at its core. Fear is a survival mechanism. Humans, like all animals, are wired to avoid harm and ensure their survival. Fear triggers the body's fight-or-flight response, which is an instinctual reaction designed to help individuals either confront danger, fight, or flee from it, flight. This biological response has been hardwired into our psychology over centuries of evolution, enabling our ancestors to respond quickly to threats in their environment, whether from predators or other dangers. In evolutionary terms, fear helped early humans stay alive by compelling them to avoid dangerous situations. This primal instinct is still very much present in modern humans, even though the threats we face may no longer be the same as those faced by our ancestors. The role of fear in compliance and obedience. Fear's primary function is to protect individuals from harm, and in a social and political context, this powerful emotion can be directed towards ensuring compliance and obedience. Machiavelli understood that people are more likely to follow authority when they fear the consequences of not doing so. This is especially important in political leadership, where rulers are trying to maintain control over a population. The power of negative consequences. Fear is driven by the anticipation of negative outcomes. People are more motivated by avoiding punishment than they are by gaining rewards or affection. In other words, the threat of pain or loss tends to have a stronger psychological impact than the promise of pleasure or benefits. This is an essential insight into why fear can be more effective than love or goodwill in maintaining power. Example: consider a government that enforces strict laws with severe punishments for violations. The fear of being arrested or penalized keeps people in line, regardless of their affection for the leadership. The fear of negative consequences, e.g., imprisonment, death, or financial ruin, ensures that citizens follow the rules and remain loyal to the authority, avoiding pain over gaining pleasure. Human psychology is deeply influenced by the desire to avoid pain rather than pursue pleasure. This is why fear is such a potent motivator. When faced with a choice between risking harm or complying with authority, people are far more likely to choose the latter. This makes fear a highly effective tool for maintaining control and ensuring obedience. Example: in the workplace, employees who fear losing their jobs or facing disciplinary action are more likely to perform their duties diligently and follow company rules. The fear of negative consequences, such as job loss, punishment, or demotion, ensures compliance, even if there's no personal affection for the employer. Fear overrides rational thought and affection. Fear is an instinctual response that often overrides rational thought. In situations of danger or potential harm, individuals will react quickly based on their instinct to protect themselves. When fear is present, rational decision-making often takes a back seat. This is what makes fear so effective in coercing people to obey authority without needing their trust or affection. Example: in times of war or civil unrest, people may follow leaders not because they like them, but because they fear the consequences of not doing so. Fear of chaos, violence, or economic collapse often leads people to follow leaders who promise to restore order and stability, even if those leaders are not beloved. Why fear doesn't rely on affection, trust, or positive relationships, unlike love or trust. Fear doesn't rely on the positive emotions that can fluctuate. Fear, by its very nature, is rooted in self-preservation and is often tied to the threat of harm or punishment, not the affection or goodwill of the ruler or leader. Because of this, fear can be a more enduring and reliable motivator for compliance than love, which is inherently more unpredictable and vulnerable to changing circumstances. The impersonal nature of fear. Fear can be instilled without the need for personal relationships. A ruler doesn't need to cultivate affection or love from their subjects to make them comply with authority. As long as the subjects fear the consequences of disobedience, such as punishment, loss of resources, or even life, they will remain obedient and submissive. Fear, therefore, provides a direct and efficient means of control that doesn't depend on the emotional connections that are often fragile. Example: totalitarian regimes often rely on fear, not love, to maintain control. Citizens live in constant fear of surveillance, punishment, or execution. The fear of government retribution ensures that people obey, even if they do not love or trust the regime. The consequences of disobedience far outweigh the benefits of resisting. Fear's ability to establish authority. A ruler or leader who instills fear can create an atmosphere of compliance without needing to foster trust or affection from the people. When fear is used effectively, it generates a clear power dynamic where the leader holds authority and the people obey because of the threat of negative outcomes, not because they feel affection or loyalty. Example: in a corporate setting, a manager who instills fear of disciplinary actions, such as termination, demotion, or public reprimands, can enforce rules and policies without needing to be liked or trusted by their employees. The fear of losing their job becomes a powerful motivator for employees to comply with expectations. Fear's long-term effectiveness. Since fear is based on the avoidance of negative consequences, It can be more enduring than love or trust, which may fluctuate based on circumstances. Even if the ruler or leader is disliked or distrusted, as long as the fear of punishment exists, obedience remains intact. This makes fear a far more stable and reliable method of control over the long term. Example: military regimes or authoritarian governments maintain control not by earning love from the people, but by keeping the population in constant fear of imprisonment or violence. Even if the people don't love the regime, the fear of reprisal keeps them compliant and docile. Fear as a tool for leaders to maintain control for leaders. Fear is an incredibly useful tool for ensuring obedience and stability in their rule. Unlike love, which can be inconsistent and vulnerable to change, fear creates a powerful motivator that doesn't depend on the whims or emotional fluctuations of the people. A leader who can instill fear can effectively control their subjects, ensuring compliance even in the absence of goodwill, trust, or positive relationships. In practice, rulers often use fear of punishment, such as imprisonment, death, economic ruin, or social ostracism, to ensure that the population follows laws, regulations, and directives. This fear-based compliance becomes the foundation for maintaining order, security, and the leader's hold on power. Machiavelli's philosophy on fear is deeply rooted in human nature and psychology, where fear works because it appeals to our primal instincts of self-preservation. Fear is a natural response to the threat of harm and is one of the most effective tools for ensuring obedience and maintaining control. Unlike love, which is unpredictable and vulnerable to change, fear is a reliable and enduring motivator that can be used strategically by rulers and leaders to create an environment of compliance. By understanding the power of fear and its psychological basis, rulers can leverage this emotion to maintain power, control, and stability in the long term. The risk of being hated. Machiavelli's warning against excessive cruelty. Machiavelli, in The Prince, provides a nuanced understanding of the power of fear in governance. While he advocates for fear as a means of maintaining control and authority, he cautions against taking it too far. One of his most important warnings is about the risk of being hated by the people. According to Machiavelli, excessive cruelty, injustice, or overly harsh punishment can backfire and transform fear into hatred, which is much more dangerous for a ruler. Let's break down why Machiavelli warns rulers about the danger of cruelty and the consequences of fostering hatred. The power of fear. Without cruelty, Machiavelli believes that fear can be a powerful tool for rulers when it is used judiciously. The key is to create a balance between fear and fairness. While fear ensures compliance and obedience, cruelty for its own sake undermines the ruler's authority and can lead to rebellion. Machiavelli stresses that a ruler must be careful not to cross the line into excessive cruelty, as it might inadvertently cause resentment and hatred from the populace. Fear, not cruelty. Fear can be used effectively to ensure loyalty and compliance, but it should always be rooted in justice and proportionality. A ruler may need to impose strict laws or punishments to maintain order, but they must do so in a way that ensures fairness. This prevents the people from feeling unfairly targeted or oppressed. Example: a ruler may impose heavy taxes on the wealthy to fund public services, but if the ruler also ensures that the burden is shared equally and that the punishment for tax evasion is consistent and fair, the people are more likely to accept the harsh measures without developing hatred. Proportionality and punishment. Machiavelli advises that punishments should be proportional to the crime, ensuring that they are just and reasonable. Excessive or overly harsh punishment can create resentment, turning fear into loathing. Example: if a ruler punishes a small crime with a severe penalty, such as execution, it may instill fear, but will also create a sense of injustice among the people. In contrast, using moderate punishments for minor offenses while imposing harsher penalties for more serious crimes keeps the sense of justice intact and avoids breeding animosity. Cruelty leads to rebellion and unrest. Machiavelli warns that if a ruler is excessively cruel or unjust, the people will eventually rebel. While fear can secure a ruler's power in the short term, cruelty breeds hatred, and once the populace despises the ruler, it becomes much harder to control. People who feel oppressed or unfairly treated are more likely to join forces and rise up against the ruler, as their fear is now replaced with anger and resistance. Fear turns to hatred. While fear can keep people in line, it also has its limits. If a ruler's actions become too extreme, fear will no longer serve as a motivator for compliance and will instead transform into hatred. This shift happens when the populace feels the ruler's cruelty is unjust and oppressive. Example: historical dictators who ruled with an iron fist, like Joseph Stalin or Adolf Hitler, used fear to consolidate power. But their excessive cruelty, e.g. mass executions, torture, suppression of dissent, eventually led to widespread hatred. In such cases, people who initially feared the ruler's authority eventually rose up, either through rebellion or resistance, as their hatred outweighed their fear. Rebellion and revolt. Hatred is dangerous because it can spark rebellion. People who fear a ruler might comply due to the threat of punishment, but when they hate a ruler, they are willing to risk everything to overthrow them. A ruler who is universally despised will find it much harder to maintain control because hatred motivates action, especially when people no longer feel they have anything to lose. Example: in medieval history, rulers who were excessively cruel, like King Richard III of England, eventually faced rebellion and revolts. People joined forces against the ruler because the cruelty became intolerable. The rebellion not only aimed to punish the ruler, but also to rid the society of a tyrant. The downfall of a ruler. Excessive cruelty can lead directly to a ruler's downfall. Once the population rises up in rebellion, a ruler's authority is undermined, and they lose their power. The more the ruler relies on fear and cruelty to maintain control, the more likely they are to be overthrown by an uprising or a coup. Example: the French Revolution is a prime example of how excessive cruelty and oppression can lead to the downfall of a ruler. King Louis XVI's indifference to the suffering of the poor and his inability to address the economic problems of France eventually led to widespread revolt and his execution. His cruelty turned into widespread hatred, which catalyzed the collapse of his regime. Machiavelli's balancing act. Fear. Without hatred. Machiavelli's key point is that fear should be used as a tool of control, but without crossing into cruelty that would inspire hatred. He argues that a ruler can effectively maintain authority if they strike a balance between being firm and just, without resorting to unnecessary cruelty. This balance ensures that while the people fear the consequences of disobedience, they do not begin to despise the ruler. Avoiding hatred and resentment. To avoid turning fear into hatred, Machiavelli suggests that rulers should act swiftly and decisively. Swift punishment ensures that people understand the consequences of defying the ruler. However, the punishment should be fair and not excessive, so that people do not feel like they are being unfairly targeted. Be seen as just. A ruler who is seen as just, even if strict, is less likely to breed hatred. If the populace believes the ruler is acting in the interest of order and the greater good, they are more likely to comply without resentment. Example: a ruler who punishes criminals swiftly, but also ensures that the law applies to all equally, without favoritism, will foster a sense of fairness and order. The people may fear the consequences of crime, but will not feel unjustly oppressed. Avoid unnecessary cruelty. A ruler should never engage in senseless cruelty or actions that are excessively violent. This includes acts of unnecessary torture, executions, or oppressive taxation that have no clear purpose other than to instill fear. Limit punishments to what is necessary. Punishments should serve the purpose of maintaining order, not as a means to express personal vengeance or cruelty. The ruler should use fear to enforce laws, but should do so with restraint and moderation. The importance of maintaining respect. over hatred. While fear can be an essential tool for maintaining control and power, excessive cruelty can lead to rebellion and revolt. Machiavelli emphasizes that a ruler must avoid being hated by their subjects, as hatred leads to instability and potential downfall. Fear should be used to ensure compliance, but it must be balanced with justice, fairness, and a sense of proportionality. A ruler who acts with fairness and reason can inspire fear without creating widespread hatred, ultimately leading to a more stable and secure reign. By understanding this balance, rulers can protect their power while avoiding the pitfalls of cruelty and resentment. Maintaining the balance, fear and benevolence in the prince. Machiavelli emphasizes the importance of balance in a ruler's use of fear and benevolence. A successful ruler knows how to wield fear as a tool for maintaining control, but also understands that benevolence, in the form of kindness, fairness, and occasional generosity, can help temper the harsher elements of rule. Machiavelli's key point here is that too much of either extreme can lead to problems. Excessive cruelty or an over-reliance on fear can result in hatred and rebellion, while excessive leniency can lead to weakness and disobedience. Let's break down these concepts in detail. The balance between fear and benevolence. Excessive cruelty versus excessive leniency. Machiavelli makes it clear that the ruler must avoid two key pitfalls. Excessive cruelty. While fear is an essential tool for maintaining authority, too much cruelty can backfire by turning the people against the ruler. When a ruler is excessively harsh, people may feel oppressed, unjustly punished, and resentful, which can lead to hatred and ultimately rebellion. This is why Machiavelli warns that cruelty should only be used when necessary and never for its own sake. Example: a ruler who imposes overly harsh punishments, such as executions for minor offenses, may inspire fear, but they will also create a deep-seated resentment. This can fuel plots to overthrow the ruler. As the people no longer fear the consequences of rebellion, they are simply driven by anger and the need for justice. Excessive leniency. On the other hand, a ruler who is too lenient and lacks the ability to act decisively can be seen as weak. When people know that there are no serious consequences for disobedience or wrongdoing, they are more likely to challenge the ruler's authority. Excessive leniency can lead to disobedience, chaos, and even the erosion of the ruler's power. People may lose respect for the ruler, and the ruler's position may become unstable. Example: if a ruler consistently forgives offenses and shows no resolve in punishing wrongdoing, people may begin to feel they can act with impunity, disregarding the ruler's authority. This weakness invites challenges to the ruler's position and might cause internal unrest. Machiavelli's solution is that fear and benevolence must work together in a balanced way. The ruler needs to inspire fear to maintain authority, but they must also maintain a sense of fairness, kindness, and justice to avoid turning fear into hatred or resentment. Effective use of fear, creating caution. Without hatred, fear should not be about constant cruelty, but about ensuring that the people understand the consequences of disobedience. It should create a sense of caution, so that people obey the ruler not out of love, but out of fear of the consequences for breaking the rules. Decisiveness. A ruler should have the ability to act decisively and swiftly when needed. The fear that comes from knowing that the ruler has the power to punish swiftly and effectively can ensure compliance. This fear makes subjects think twice before defying authority. Example: a ruler who punishes traitors or criminals swiftly and visibly sends a message to the population that the ruler is powerful, just and not to be defied. The threat of swift punishment, however, should not extend to every action, just enough to keep people aware of the consequences of going against the ruler's will. Not losing sight of benevolence, generosity, and justice. While fear plays an essential role, benevolence, in the form of justice, fairness, and occasional acts of kindness, is equally important. Machiavelli does not suggest that rulers should be tyrannical or cruel all the time. A ruler's power is stronger when their actions are perceived as fair and just, justice over cruelty. A ruler should maintain a reputation for being just. This means the ruler must ensure that punishments are proportional to the crime and that laws are enforced fairly. Rulers who act with fairness, even while maintaining strict control, are less likely to inspire hatred and more likely to maintain stability. Occasional generosity. Benevolence can take the form of occasional generosity. When the ruler shows that they are not entirely driven by self-interest or cruelty, they create goodwill among their subjects. Benevolence can also be a strategic tool to secure loyalty and goodwill, particularly during times of hardship or economic distress. Example: a ruler who occasionally rewards loyal subjects, offers charitable acts during times of famine, or grants amnesty to those who have committed minor offenses can foster a sense of loyalty and affection, making their rule more stable. Avoiding tyranny. Benevolence helps prevent the ruler from being perceived as a tyrant. People will not only fear the ruler but will also respect their authority if the ruler is seen as someone who brings justice and order. This is the balance Machiavelli advocates. For rulers must combine fear with benevolence to maintain control effectively and avoid despised tyranny. Fear in political and real-world contexts. Machiavelli's insights on fear are not only relevant to monarchs and rulers of the past, they can be applied to modern political leadership and even business leadership. Fear remains a powerful tool for maintaining authority, but how it manifests has evolved in today's world. Fear of economic collapse. Political leaders today may use fear of economic collapse or financial instability to rally support and justify actions. In some cases, they may exaggerate or manipulate fears about a looming crisis, presenting themselves as the solution to the problem. This creates a sense of urgency among the population and reinforces the leader's authority as the one who can protect the country from disaster. Example: a government may highlight the dangers of an economic recession, inflation, or job loss, positioning the leader as the only one capable of saving the economy. Fear of losing financial security can lead the people to support the government's policies, even if those policies involve some sacrifices. Fear of social unrest or security. Threats leaders can also exploit fear of social unrest, terrorism, or crime to consolidate power. By presenting themselves as the protector of order and safety, they can increase their control over the population. Fear of instability or external threats can rally people around a strong leader who promises to restore peace and security. Example: leaders in authoritarian regimes may use fear of external threats or internal terrorism to justify stricter laws, surveillance, and control measures. Citizens, in turn, comply with these measures because they fear the consequences of unrest or instability. Fear in business, managing performance and compliance. In the corporate world, fear is often used to drive performance and ensure compliance with company policies. Employees may fear the consequences of poor performance, such as job loss, demotion, or reprimands, which motivates them to adhere to the company's expectations. However, just as Machiavelli warns, this fear must be carefully managed to avoid creating a toxic work environment. Example: a manager may use fear of termination or demotion to encourage employees to meet targets. However, if the fear becomes overwhelming, employees may become disengaged, stressed, or resentful, leading to high turnover and low morale. The key is to strike a balance where the fear of failure drives productivity without damaging the overall culture of the organization. The art of balancing fear and benevolence. Machiavelli's philosophy on leadership revolves around the delicate balance between fear and benevolence. Rulers or leaders must wield fear effectively to maintain control, but they must also act with justice, fairness, and benevolence to prevent the people from feeling oppressed. The fear should create caution and respect, while benevolence builds loyalty and goodwill. Excessive cruelty can lead to hatred and rebellion, while excessive leniency can lead to weakness and disobedience. In modern contexts, Machiavelli's ideas still apply. Fear of economic collapse, social unrest, or job loss can be powerful motivators. However, leaders must ensure that fear is used strategically without allowing it to become oppressive or toxic. The best leaders combine decisiveness, fairness, and generosity to maintain a stable and loyal following, just as Machiavelli advised centuries ago. Fear in political and real-world contexts. Machiavelli's insights into fear and control extend far beyond the traditional monarchies or principalities that he originally addressed in The Prince. His theories are just as relevant in modern political systems and business environments, where fear can be used as a tool to influence behavior, rally support, and maintain authority. However, in contemporary settings, fear is less about physical punishment and more about managing perceptions, creating a sense of urgency, and controlling narratives. Let's explore how fear manifests in modern political and business contexts and the implications of using fear as a leadership tool. Fear of economic collapse in politics. 1. Of the most powerful ways fear can be employed in modern politics is through the fear of economic collapse or financial instability. Political leaders often exploit fears surrounding a looming economic crisis to rally public support for their policies or consolidate their own power. By exaggerating or highlighting perceived economic threats, they can justify drastic actions and present themselves as the only ones capable of preventing disaster. How it works. Leaders may create a sense of economic uncertainty, warning the public about rising debt, inflation, unemployment, or the collapse of important industries. This fear of economic collapse serves multiple purposes. Consolidating power. By presenting themselves as the only figure capable of managing the crisis, leaders can justify increased control over the economy, or even push through policies that would otherwise be unpopular. Rallying support for drastic measures. In times of economic fear, populations may be more willing to accept higher taxes, austerity measures, or even cuts to social services, believing that these actions are necessary for economic survival. Shifting blame. Leaders can use the fear of economic decline to shift blame for poor economic conditions onto external forces, such as global markets, other countries, or political opposition, positioning themselves as the protector of national stability. Example: in recent years, economic crises like the 2008 financial crash or the more recent COVID-19 recession have seen political leaders use the fear of economic collapse to justify large-scale intervention in the market, as well as emergency measures that grant them temporary or even expanded powers. During the 2008 global financial crisis, governments around the world adopted drastic economic measures, including bank bailouts and stimulus packages. Politicians who successfully managed these crises were often seen as the saviors of the economy, even if the policies had long-term consequences. Risks. While fear of economic collapse can rally support in the short term, it can also lead to mistrust and disillusionment if the crisis is either exaggerated or not effectively managed. If the fear is unwarranted or leaders fail to address the root causes of the instability, the public may eventually turn on the leadership. Fear of social unrest, political control. Through safety, leaders can also use fear of social unrest, such as crime, terrorism, or civil disorder, as a tool to justify increased control or authoritarian measures. By stoking fear about national security, law and order, or external threats, political figures can gain support for policies that may limit individual freedoms or expand the state's power. How it works. Heighten security. A leader might exploit fear by promoting the idea that society is under threat, whether from internal crime waves or external terrorist attacks. In such cases, the population becomes more willing to give up certain freedoms in exchange for security. Law and order rhetoric. By presenting themselves as the protector of order, leaders can justify increasing the power of the police, enacting harsh laws and silencing dissent. The fear of losing stability in society can create a rally around the flag effect, with citizens trusting the leader to maintain law and order, even if it comes at the cost of civil liberties. Distraction from other issues. In some cases, leaders may heighten fears of social unrest or external threats to distract the public from other problems, such as economic issues, corruption, or failed policies, shifting the focus toward security. Example: the war on terror in the early 21st century serves as an example of how fear of terrorism was used to justify increased surveillance, military interventions, and domestic policies that curtailed individual freedoms. The fear of terrorism created widespread support for measures such as the USA Patriot Act, which expanded government surveillance powers. Similarly, law and order campaigns often use the fear of crime or civil unrest to justify tough-on-crime policies, such as mass incarceration or militarization of the police. Risks. While fear of social unrest can consolidate power in the short term, it can also lead to authoritarianism and civil rights violations if used excessively. Leaders who manipulate public fear too often risk creating a climate of fear and oppression, where the people feel more threatened by their government than by external or internal dangers. For example, while counterterrorism measures may be justified in the name of national security, they can also lead to civil liberties abuses, racial profiling, and increased public resentment if not implemented transparently. Fear in business, motivating employees and driving performance. In the corporate world, fear is often used to drive performance and ensure compliance. Leaders and managers may instill a sense of fear about job loss, market competition, or poor performance in order to push employees to work harder and meet targets. While this can be an effective motivator, it must be carefully managed to avoid creating a toxic work culture. How it works. Fear of job loss. Leaders may use the fear of job termination to ensure employees stay motivated, meet deadlines, and perform at high levels. The fear of losing a job often compels employees to give their best performance, as they know that failure to meet expectations could result in dismissal. Fear of market competition. Fear of falling behind competitors can also be a powerful motivator. Leaders may foster a competitive atmosphere, where employees fear being left behind or outperformed, pushing them to innovate and excel. Pressure to perform. In some cases, leaders use performance metrics or targets to create a sense of urgency. If employees fear missing targets and facing negative consequences, e.g., demotion, salary cuts, or disciplinary actions, they may work harder to meet expectations. Example: companies like Amazon have been known for creating high-pressure environments where employees are constantly aware of performance targets. The fear of job loss or being replaced by someone more efficient pushes workers to maintain high productivity levels, often with little room for error. Sales-driven organizations also frequently use the fear of not meeting sales quotas to encourage employees to meet goals. Fear of losing commissions or being replaced by top performers motivates employees to go above and beyond in their sales efforts. Risks. While fear can drive performance, overusing it can create a toxic work culture. Employees may become disengaged, burned out, and resentful if they feel they are constantly under threat of job loss or negative consequences. Over-reliance on fear can also lead to high turnover rates, increased stress levels, and diminished overall productivity. Example: research has shown that workplaces that rely heavily on fear often see higher employee turnover, lower morale, and increased absenteeism, as employees who feel threatened or undervalued are less likely to be motivated in the long term. The careful use of fear in leadership. Machiavelli's concept of fear as a tool for maintaining power and control remains relevant in modern political and business environments. However, the fear used in contemporary settings is not always physical punishment, but takes the form of economic threats, social unrest, and competitive pressure. While fear can be an effective motivator for rallying support, Ensuring compliance and driving performance, it must be used strategically and responsibly. In politics, fear can help leaders consolidate power, but it risks authoritarianism and civil rights abuses if misused. In business, fear can drive productivity, but it must be balanced with positive reinforcement to avoid a toxic culture. Ultimately, fear should be used with caution. Leaders must understand its potential to inspire loyalty and compliance, but they should also be mindful of the risks of creating resentment or oppression if fear is used excessively. The most successful leaders are those who can balance fear with benevolence, ensuring they maintain control while fostering trust, loyalty, and engagement from those they lead. Machiavelli's wisdom in today's world. Machiavelli's ideas, particularly about the use of fear, remain incredibly relevant in today's world, both in the political realm and business leadership. In The Prince, Machiavelli laid the groundwork for understanding how rulers and leaders can use fear to maintain power, but he also warned about the risks of excessive cruelty or reliance on fear alone. While fear can be an effective tool for leadership, Machiavelli's insights show that trust, respect, and fairness are equally important for long-term stability and success. Let's break down how fear continues to influence leadership today and why it needs to be managed carefully. The role of fear in politics today. In modern politics, fear is still a powerful tool used by political leaders to rally public support, influence opinion, and maintain control. Political leaders often capitalize on fear of external threats, economic instability, terrorism, or social unrest to secure their positions and justify their policies. How political leaders use fear. Fear of crisis or collapse. Political leaders often exploit fear of economic collapse, inflation, or national security threats to consolidate their power. By presenting themselves as the only ones who can protect the people from these dangers, they can gain public trust and support, even for unpopular policies. Example: during times of economic downturn, leaders may exaggerate the potential consequences of an economic crisis, making the public more willing to accept austerity measures, tax increases, or emergency powers. Fear of terrorism or crime. Leaders may also use fear of terrorism or crime waves to justify stronger security measures, surveillance, and restrictions on civil liberties. By presenting themselves as the protector of public safety, these leaders can justify increasing their power and control over the population. Example: after the September 11 attacks in the U.S., the war on terror led to the creation of security policies like the USA Patriot Act, which gave the government extensive surveillance powers in the name of protecting national security. However, excessive reliance on fear in politics can have negative consequences. Fear may rally people in the short term, but it can erode trust, foster resentment, and lead to polarization in society. The role of fear in business leadership. In the corporate world, fear can be used to ensure compliance, increase productivity, and drive performance. Business leaders often use fear to push employees to meet targets, achieve goals, and avoid failure. Fear of job loss, poor performance reviews, or market competition can compel employees to work harder and adhere to company policies. How business leaders use fear. Fear of job loss or disciplinary action. Managers may use the fear of termination or punishment to ensure employees comply with rules and perform at high levels. The threat of losing one's job or missing out on promotions can motivate employees to go above and beyond in their work. Fear of market competition. Fear of being outperformed by competitors can also drive employees to work harder and stay ahead in the marketplace. In some industries, fear of falling behind the competition pushes workers to innovate and maintain high levels of performance. Pressure to meet targets. Leaders may use performance targets to create a sense of urgency. Employees who fear missing their targets may push themselves harder to meet expectations, fearing the consequences of failure, such as demotion or reprimands. Risks in business leadership. While fear can encourage high performance, it can also create a toxic work environment if not properly managed. Overuse of fear in the workplace can lead to burnout, low morale, and employee disengagement. Excessive fear of failure or job loss may result in high turnover rates, stress, and diminished productivity. The importance of trust and respect. While fear can help leaders gain control, trust and respect are the long-term foundations of stable leadership. In the modern world, a leader who relies solely on fear may achieve short-term success, but they are unlikely to maintain their authority over time. The key to sustaining power is striking a balance between fear and the cultivation of trust, loyalty, and respect. Why trust and respect matter. Trust is the foundation of loyalty. Leaders who inspire trust in their followers are more likely to build loyalty. People are more willing to follow a leader whom they trust, even in difficult times. This loyalty is a stronger motivator than fear alone, as it is rooted in mutual respect and a belief in the leader's competence and integrity. Example: leaders like Nelson Mandela and Winston Churchill were able to inspire not just fear due to their positions, but genuine respect and trust. They fostered loyalty among their followers through their moral authority, vision, and commitment to the people's well-being. Respect ensures long-term stability. A leader who commands respect is more likely to maintain their position in the long term. People who respect their leader will follow them not out of fear, but because they believe in the leader's vision, principles, and ability to lead justly. Example: Angela Merkel, former Chancellor of Germany, gained a reputation for respect, trustworthiness, and prudence. Even when her policies were challenging, she maintained support because of the trust people had in her leadership. The balance between fear and benevolence. Machiavelli advises that fear should be tempered by benevolence, a sense of fairness, kindness, and justice. Effective leaders in both politics and business understand that benevolence fosters respect, which in turn maintains long-term stability. When leaders combine fear with fairness, they create an environment where people comply not just out of fear, but out of a sense of duty, respect, and shared purpose. Example: in the workplace, a manager who combines firm policies with fair treatment, recognition of achievement, and open communication is likely to foster a more motivated and loyal team. Employees will respect the leader's authority and work hard because they believe in the vision and fairness of the organization. Long-term stability through balance. Machiavelli emphasizes that long-term stability can only be achieved by balancing fear with fairness, justice, and benevolence. A leader who inspires fear but also offers security, stability, and opportunities for growth is far more likely to maintain their authority. Leaders who rely solely on fear can create an atmosphere of resentment and rebellion, whereas those who balance fear with fairness will create a more loyal and stable following. The importance of long-term vision. Creating opportunities for growth. Leaders who balance fear with growth opportunities, such as career development, training, and advancement, will foster a loyal workforce. Fear alone can't sustain long-term loyalty. People need to see that their efforts are being rewarded and that they have opportunities to improve and grow. Example: a company that instills fear through performance expectations but also provides career growth, skills training, and internal promotions will be more likely to retain high-performing employees than a company that relies only on threats of punishment for failure. Maintaining stability and safety. Leaders who are seen as just and capable are more likely to inspire respect, even when fear is present. When a leader balances fear with a sense of stability and order, they create an environment where people feel secure and protected, not just fearful of the consequences of disobedience. The lasting power of balance. Machiavelli's wisdom about fear remains incredibly relevant in today's world, where fear can be used in politics and business to achieve short-term control. However, Machiavelli also warns that fear alone is not enough. Long-term stability and respect come from balancing fear with benevolence, justice, fairness, and the ability to inspire trust in followers. In politics, leaders who balance fear with genuine concern for public well-being and offer opportunities for growth and improvement will maintain their power more effectively than those who rely solely on fear of punishment or crisis. In business leaders must create a culture of respect and fairness, offering opportunities for growth and security, while using fear to encourage compliance with rules and performance goals. Machiavelli's insights remind us that the most successful leaders are those who inspire fear and respect in equal measure, ensuring that their power is not only based on control, but also on a sense of legitimacy, competence, and fairness.